Our MC wanted to reach the peak of martial arts, but he already knew that it was a position he could never achieve, no matter how much he tried. However, he was desperate to achieve his goal, and because of this, he decided to follow a legend that had been passed down through generations. Apparently, there was a golden fruit located within a sanctuary that was guarded by a dragon. This fruit was said to grant immortality. After a hard, long-fought battle against the dragon, our MC finally reached the golden fruit. He was surprised to see that the fruit actually existed, and he sat on the dragon's corpse like a true conqueror before making a move to eat it. He was confident that by consuming the fruit, he would finally be able to reach the peak of martial arts. Our MC's name was Gilfus Eldrian, and he was hailed as the strongest man in the world. Decades later, Gilfus had grown old and was now on his deathbed. He was surrounded by his family members, and sitting beside him was his eldest son, Gileam. Gilfus noticed the sadness on his son's face and urged him to stay strong, saying that his time had come. Gileam was heartbroken that he was about to lose his father, just as he had already lost his mother. As he approached death, Gilfus thought about the immortality fruit and realized that it had all been nonsense. However, he found comfort in the fact that he had been blessed with a loving wife and children. He told his family that he had lived a good life and had no regrets. Deep down, however, that was a complete lie. Gilfus regretted that he had never been able to reach the true peak of martial arts. Moments later, he passed away. Suddenly, he opened his eyes again. Shocked, he wondered why everything looked different. His body felt strangely light, and when he looked at his hands, he realized they were tiny baby hands. It finally dawned on him that he was a baby lying in a crib. Although stunned, Gilfus quickly calmed himself. After all, he had been a 10-star warrior in his previous life. He concluded that his situation was far from normal and began wondering what could have caused it. Then it hit him. The so-called immortality fruit he had eaten was not actually an immortality fruit. The fruit's true power was reincarnation, not immortality, just as he had once suspected. Instead of being disappointed, he smiled. In fact, he considered reincarnation to be an even better blessing. Now he had another chance to reach the peak of martial arts. Looking around, he noticed several other babies nearby. Since he was in a separate building, he concluded that he had been reborn into the dragon family. However, he soon wondered why there were so many babies gathered in one room. Just then, several maids entered carrying feeding bottles. One of them reached into a crib and picked up a baby goblin before feeding it from a bottle. Gilfus was shocked to see a goblin among the babies and wondered what the maids were planning. After drinking the red substance from the bottle, the goblin suddenly exploded, spraying blood everywhere and splattering Gilfus's face. Terrified, he tried to understand what had been inside the bottle. The maids then decided to dilute the substance and continued feeding it to the children. Soon, Gilfus himself was picked up by a maid while he was still trying to process what had just happened. He could clearly see that the bottle's contents were not milk. Instead, it seemed to be overflowing with magical energy. He couldn't believe that the maids were feeding babies something so dangerous. The maid pushed the bottle into his mouth, and as soon as he tasted the liquid, Gilfus finally realized what it was. Ancient dragon blood. He was stunned. How could anyone be insane enough to make babies drink dragon blood? He finally understood why the maids had talked about diluting it. At first, he planned to spit it out immediately. However, he realized that he had already swallowed a small amount. Fortunately, he concluded that such a tiny quantity probably would not kill him. He noticed that the other babies were also spitting out the substance and decided that doing the same was the safest option before he exploded. Then another thought crossed his mind. What if spitting it out was a mistake? If he managed to absorb all of the magical power contained within the dragon blood, he might surpass his former self and finally reach the peak of martial arts. Although he had no idea what was really happening, he decided to take advantage of the opportunity. With determination burning in his eyes, he drank every last drop from the bottle. Even the maid was shocked to see him happily consuming the dragon blood. At the same time, she seemed pleased that things were proceeding as expected. After finishing the entire bottle, Gilfus was placed back into his crib. He quickly realized that the other babies had also survived the ordeal. Like any ordinary baby, after a full meal, he soon became sleepy and drifted off to sleep. 7 years later, Gilfus could be seen training intensely. He balanced a massive boulder on his feet while performing one-handed push-ups. After completing 1,000 push-ups, he launched the boulder into the distance with a powerful kick. Admiring his muscular physique, he couldn't help but smile. By this point, Gilfus was now known as Zeke Eldrian. Zeke attributed his incredible strength to the dragon blood he had consumed as a baby. The dragon blood contained an immense amount of power, and even babies who had only absorbed a small amount developed bodies far stronger than those of ordinary humans. However, thanks to the divine dragon's true source power that he had already absorbed in his previous life, Zeke was able to absorb every drop of the ancient dragon's unique power. This resulted in a transformation so extraordinary that even he was shocked by the outcome. Despite all this, Zeke remained disappointed. He was still only a 1-star warrior. In his opinion, he should have been at least a 4-star warrior by now. A star represented one's true source of power compressed to its absolute limit. Practitioners envisioned their bodies as universes and allowed stars to move within them. As more stars were formed, the difficulty increased dramatically, but so did the power they granted. In his previous life, Zeke had managed to reach the rank of 10 stars, making him the only person in history to ever achieve such a feat. 7 years had passed since Zeke was born as the son of the current head of the dragon family. However, he was merely an illegitimate child. His mother had already passed away, and his father had never once bothered to show his face. Zeke couldn't believe that he had ended up with such a worthless father. To make matters even stranger, he had reincarnated 1,000 years into the future. The world had changed drastically and had become a brutal place where the weak died at the hands of the strong. There is also a strange ritual known as the Dragon's Trial. Only babies who survive drinking the dragon's blood are supposed to be trained as dragon warriors, but Zeke has not received a single lesson from anyone. He tries asking the maid a few questions, but she simply replies that she is not at liberty to say anything. Frustrated, Zeke reminds her that those who pass the trial are supposed to receive combat training, yet he is surrounded only by maids, and not a single instructor is anywhere in sight. The maid remains expressionless like a doll and asks if there is anything he requires. Zeke says no. In truth, he can manage on his own because he is currently more focused on building his body than receiving combat training. Zeke then asks the maid if she can tell him about the other children of the main family, but she gives him the same response, claiming that she is not at liberty to say. He attempts to word his questions differently to get around her restrictions, but she stubbornly repeats the same answer. Irritated, Zeke wonders if that is the only phrase she knows. He then asks if he is being kept in this house to be mistreated. The maid immediately denies this, explaining that they have been ordered to tend to all of his personal needs. Zeke notices that the maid herself is a 3-star fighter and thinks that she could be useful for combat training. Since the maid refuses to be helpful, Zeke decides it is time to head into the forest. He cannot believe that he has been living with a maid for 3 years without developing any real connection with her. He waits for a response, but the maid remains silent, seemingly ignoring him altogether. Once inside the forest, Zeke begins eating various poisonous herbs. They taste absolutely awful, but he does not care because he considers it part of his training. Suddenly, he notices a faint trail following him. He wonders why someone would follow him without stepping forward to speak. Deciding not to concern himself with it, he focuses on what lies ahead. Before long, he spots an angry boar standing in his path. At the same time, he realizes that the black mist surrounding the person following him did not exist during his previous life, making him curious about what exactly it is. Nevertheless, Zeke reveals himself to the boar, and as expected, it charges straight toward him. A grin spreads across his face as he realizes he has successfully gained the boar's attention. Zeke assumes the perfect stance and effortlessly dodges the charging beast. The moment the boar leaves itself open, he delivers a punch directly to its stomach. The impact is terrifying. The force crushes the boar's internal organs and kills it instantly with a single strike. Zeke is impressed that even a light punch from him, despite being only a 1-star warrior, was enough to defeat the boar in one hit. From this, he concludes that the quality of a star matters more than the quantity. He lifts the dead boar onto his shoulder and begins making his way home. Along the way, Zeke reflects on how tired he has become of living alone and starts considering going on an adventure. However, he realizes that the sea is the only route available if he wants to travel anywhere. Meanwhile, the mysterious man who had been following Zeke is completely shocked. He cannot believe that Zeke managed to kill a boar with a single punch despite never receiving any combat training. Even more surprising is the fact that Zeke noticed his presence despite his efforts to remain hidden. The man concludes that Zeke is far from an ordinary child. Considering that Zeke's mother died when he was young and his father showed no interest in him, there should have been no opportunity for him to receive any proper education. Even so, Zeke is not allowed to leave because he is still the child of the family head. For that reason, he has been kept under constant surveillance. The mysterious observer realizes that events are becoming more interesting with every passing moment. When Zeke returns home, he notices that visitors have arrived at the house. He immediately senses their strength and begins wondering what they could possibly want from him. Quietly approaching the door, he listens to their conversation. From what he can tell, they harbor no killing intent. Finally, he opens the door and sees several men waiting inside. He asks them why they have come. As he examines them, he notices the dragon family emblem on their clothing, making him even more curious. One of the men explains that they have come to take him away because he must undergo an examination. Hearing this, Zeke nearly loses his mind. No one had ever informed him about any examination. Soon afterward, he is escorted to the main house. He never imagined that he would return there after 1,000 years had passed. The men dress him in a school uniform, and he eventually learns the reason for being brought to the main house. It is not for luxury. He has been brought there to attend the academy known as Dragon's Nest. Established by the dragon family, the academy is a place that every child born into the family dreams of entering. Apparently, all children receive formal education once they reach 7 years of age, and today happens to be the entrance examination. The problem is that Zeke never received any education in the first place. Unfortunately, he has no choice but to participate because the examination is mandatory. That is why he was taken all the way from his isolated home in the woods and brought to the main house. Zeke is frustrated by everything, and this causes him to bow his head in pain. While the other students walk past him, one of them, a blue-haired boy named Langus, approaches him. Langus is from Old Scale Village, and he asks Zeke if he is alright or if he is having some sort of trouble. Zeke turns around to look at him and rudely asks what he wants. Langus appears to be a timid person and explains that he was only trying to help because Zeke looked troubled. Zeke is surprised by Langus's approach. He can tell that Langus is the shy type, but he also senses a certain power flowing through him. Zeke gets to his feet and apologizes for being rude. He introduces himself and explains that he is simply confused about what the family heads are planning to make them do. Langus replies that the content of the examination does not change from year to year. However, Zeke quickly clears up the misunderstanding by admitting that he actually has no idea what the examination is about. Langus is shocked when he realizes that the boy standing before him genuinely knows absolutely nothing about the test. He begins to wonder whether Zeke will be alright, considering that he has no idea what he is about to face. Deciding to help, Langus prepares to explain everything to him. Just as he is about to begin, a group of bullies suddenly appears from behind and calls Langus a runt. Even Zeke is surprised to hear someone addressing him that way. The group is led by a boy named Retin, who is also from Old Scale Village. Retin mocks Langus, asking why a runt like him would even bother showing up for the examination when he could simply go home and play around. Langus completely misses the insult and calmly replies that he came for the examination. His innocent answer only causes Retin to become even angrier. Retin shouts that Langus is a piece of trash and that there is no chance someone like him will ever gain admission into the academy. Retin continues by ridiculing Langus and reminding him that his father is a mock dragon. Zeke notices that Langus is furious, seeing that he has clenched his fists tightly. Apparently, the dragon family operates under a strict hierarchy established by an absolute monarch. At the lowest recognized level are the rookies, known as lesser dragons. Above them are the common soldiers, who are called young dragons. The captain class members are known as adult dragons. At the very top are the elders and executive class members, referred to as elder dragons. However, there is an even lower level reserved for those considered failures. These individuals are called mock dragons. Mock dragons are people who failed to enter Dragon's Nest, or those who were unable to graduate from the academy. They are essentially regarded as fakes. Despite this stigma, Langus wants to prove that people like him are not fake dragons. At this point, Zeke decides to join the conversation. He asks Retin how he can be so sure that Langus is trash when he has not even taken the examination yet. Retin is surprised by Zeke's interference and demands to know who he is. He asks if Zeke has a problem with him. Zeke calmly replies that he does not have any problem. He simply wants to know why Retin believes it is impossible for Langus to enter the academy. Retin answers that people like Langus are weaklings. Zeke is astonished by the response and casually tells Retin that Langus is stronger than him and his entire gang of trash. This immediately enrages Retin. He demands to know whether Zeke is implying that they are beneath someone like Langus. Before the confrontation can escalate any further, an examiner arrives and announces that the entrance examination is about to begin. He informs all applicants that they must register and collect a numbered tag before participating. Retin glares at Zeke with obvious disgust and promises that he will remember his face. Zeke is surprised that Retin has become so angry so quickly and wonders why the current generation is so short-tempered. Langus is stunned by this statement because they are all the same age. He points out that anyone would become angry if they were called weak. Zeke then asks whether the examination is mandatory. Langus explains that participants are free free to withdraw if they feel they lack the ability to take part. This surprises Zeke, but it only further convinces Langus that Zeke truly knows nothing about the examination. Concerned for him, Langus advises Zeke to withdraw before he gets hurt during the test. Zeke immediately tells him that he has no intention of withdrawing. Langus is amazed by how confident Zeke remains, despite not even knowing what the examination involves. Zeke then suggests that they get moving before the examination starts. A short time later, all of the applicants gather together. The examiner stands before them and explains the details of the test. According to him, all they need to do to pass is leave a scratch on the large rock placed in front of them. However, they are forbidden from using any weapons other than those provided by the examiner. To make things even more interesting, participants are also allowed to use their bare hands if they believe they can scratch the rock that way. The examiner further reveals that every applicant will be given 3 attempts. To Zeke, this does not sound like a particularly difficult examination. Langus, however, is horrified when he hears the details. Zeke cannot understand why he is so shocked, since all they have to do is scratch a rock. After surviving a trial that involved drinking dragon blood as babies, Zeke had expected something far more outrageous. Compared to that, this examination leaves him extremely disappointed. The examiner then officially begins the test. The first applicant steps forward and swings his sword at the rock with all his strength. The instant the blade strikes, a deafening bang echoes through the area. The force of the impact shatters the sword completely, yet the rock remains untouched without even the slightest scratch. The boy immediately collapses to the ground in agony. The examiners ask whether he wishes to use his remaining 2 attempts, but he is in so much pain that he is unable to continue. The examiners declare the first applicant's attempt a forfeit, and he is taken away. Zeke notices that Langus is acting strangely and wonders why, since the examination appears to be quite easy. Curious, Zeke asks Langus about the rock. Langus explains that the rock is called the Regeneration Stone, and that it has the ability to instantly repair any minor scratch made on its surface. In addition, the Regeneration Stone can reflect damage back at an attacker 100 times over if brute force is used against it. Upon hearing this, Zeke concludes that the rock is rather outrageous. Langus further explains that it is actually possible to leave a scratch on the stone if a person's ether source power is circulated properly. Based on this information, Zeke realizes that the examination is more about the correct handling and control of ether source power than martial arts skill itself. Looking around at the other participants, Zeke determines that there are quite a few applicants capable of passing the examination. He notices that Retin and his group also seem strong enough to succeed. As he watches, applicant after applicant fails, many of them suffering broken arms after attempting to scratch the stone. Before long, the examiner calls out applicant number 315, which happens to be Zeke's number. Langus immediately becomes worried and urges Zeke to withdraw from the examination. However, Zeke assures him that everything will be fine. As Zeke steps forward, the examiner immediately senses an immense pressure and aura emanating from him. The examiner asks Zeke which weapon he would like to use. To everyone's surprise, Zeke replies that he does not need a weapon because he plans to use his bare hands. The examiner asks once again whether he is certain about that choice, but Zeke confidently answers yes, stating that his fists are more than enough for the task. When the other students hear this, they burst into laughter and begin mocking him. They insist that there is no way anyone could leave a scratch on the Regeneration Stone with bare fists. Even Langus lacks confidence in Zeke's chances, genuinely fearing that Zeke's arms and fists might be torn apart. Langus begins blaming himself, thinking that he should have done more to stop Zeke from participating in the examination. Since Zeke has already made up his mind, the examiner tells him to proceed. Approaching the stone, Zeke examines it closely and admits that it is composed of a mineral he has never seen before. He concludes that it must have formed sometime during the 1,000 years that passed after his previous life. Realizing there are still countless things he does not know about this new era, Zeke decides to leave those questions for the future and focus on the present. He begins gathering power into his body, preparing to strike the stone. Judging by the amount of energy he has generated, he believes it should be sufficient for what he intends to do. The technique he chooses to use is known as the Dragon Slayer combat technique form. A brilliant yellow aura surrounds his body and concentrates around his arm. Then, with a powerful powerful motion, Zeke slams his fist into the regeneration stone. The impact is explosive. The top portion of the stone shatters instantly, producing a thunderous noise and a massive cloud of dust. Everyone present is left stunned. Most of the spectators instinctively close their eyes from the force of the blast, but the examiner keeps his eyes open, carefully observing everything. Zeke lets out a sigh of relief. However, he quickly realizes that the technique was somewhat too advanced for someone of his current age and physical condition. Looking down at his arm, he notices that it is bleeding, and that his school uniform has been torn apart by the strain. Rather than praising himself for destroying the stone, Zeke concludes that his training is still insufficient. The other students are left speechless, wondering how he managed to accomplish such an impossible feat. Retin, on the other hand, is simply furious that Zeke succeeded in shattering the stone. Langus is so shocked that his jaw practically drops to the ground. Of all the people present, Zeke was the last person he expected to pass the examination. Even the examiner finds what he witnessed difficult to believe. In his understanding, only someone at the rank of 4 stars or higher should have been capable of destroying a regeneration stone. Since Zeke is an illegitimate child of the family, the examiner begins wondering whether he somehow inherited an extraordinary power from the main bloodline. The examiner also feels that he has seen the technique Zeke used somewhere before. Afterward, Zeke calmly approaches the examiner and asks how he performed in the examination. The examiner informs him that he has passed. As a reward, Zeke is handed a bottle containing a green liquid. Curious about its contents, he asks a junior examiner what is inside the bottle. The man simply glares at him with obvious hostility and tells him to move aside. Zeke decides to assume that the bottle is some kind of reward for passing the test. Returning to his newly made friend, Langus immediately praises him for his incredible performance. Zeke then asks Langus about the bottle. Langus explains that it contains a healing potion. Hearing this, Zeke is confused. Langus further clarifies that it is a normal grade healing potion. Zeke examines the liquid more carefully and realizes that it does not appear poisonous. This causes him to wonder whether the so-called healing potion might actually be an elixir. An elixir is a special potion created from extremely rare materials. It is combined with herbs that grow only within Secret Realm. Furthermore, pure elixir cores harvested from divine beasts and phantom beasts are added to its creation. Consuming an elixir allows old and recent wounds to heal instantly while also increasing a person's ether. However, refining an elixir is exceptionally difficult because its ingredients are incredibly rare and hard to obtain. For this reason, elixirs rarely appear on the market. Zeke finally drinks the healing potion. Just as he expected, the wounds on his torn arms heal almost instantly. He is completely amazed by the result and concludes that the healing potion is actually an elixir in disguise. Langus admits that he has no idea what an elixir is, but he proudly explains that the dragon family's healing potions are far superior to the ordinary ones sold in stores. Langus considers it completely normal, while Zeke is utterly astonished because all of his injuries healed instantly. However, he notices that there is no ether surge like the one that occurs when he consumes an elixir. Langus tells Zeke that he is quite impressive, but Zeke does not agree. Examining the bottle again, Zeke realizes that it represents the pinnacle of what human knowledge has managed to create over the course of 1,000 years. Langus once again reminds Zeke that he is very strong, but Zeke casually replies that his goal is to become the strongest, so he is not particularly impressed by his current abilities. Soon afterward, Retin and his gang of bullies step forward to take their examination. As Zeke expected, every one of them passes. He is not surprised in the slightest because he had already determined that they possessed enough ability to succeed. Finally, applicant number 414 is called, and it turns out to be Langus. As Langus begins walking down the stairs toward the examination area, Zeke notices how nervous he is. Wanting to encourage him, Zeke tells him to pull himself together and assures him that everything will be fine. Langus immediately turns around and tells Zeke to stop setting the bar so high. When Langus reaches the testing area, he picks up a sword. Watching from the side, Zeke wonders what exactly Langus is thinking. Taking a deep breath, Langus swings the sword at the regeneration stone. Unfortunately, he fails to leave even the slightest scratch and ends up falling to the ground. As usual, the examiner informs him that he still has 2 attempts remaining. Langus stands up and tries again, but the outcome remains unchanged. Once more, he fails to damage the stone and collapses onto the ground. Tears begin to form in his eyes as he wonders if he is truly about to fail, just as the bullies had always predicted. As expected, Retin and his friends immediately begin laughing at him. They mock him, declaring that the child of a half-dragon will always remain a half-dragon. They urge him to give up while reminding Zeke that he had previously claimed someone as weak as Langus was stronger than all of them. The examiner then informs Langus that he has only one attempt remaining. He asks whether Langus wishes to try again. At that moment, Langus begins stuttering and mentally falls into a state of complete darkness. Suddenly, Zeke's voice echoes through that darkness. He asks Langus what he thinks he is doing. Confused, Langus turns around and Zeke suggests that he use a spear instead of a sword. Langus is baffled by the advice, but Zeke insists that he is completely serious. He scolds Langus for trying to use a weapon that simply does not suit him. Zeke confidently states that no matter how many times Langus swings a sword, he will never be able to leave a mark on the regeneration stone. Retin and his friends immediately burst into laughter again. They point out that Langus has been trained to use a sword since childhood and has never received any lessons with a spear. Furthermore, they insist that changing weapons will not change the fact that Langus is pathetic. Ignoring them, Zeke turns to the examiner and asks whether participants are allowed to switch weapons in the middle of the examination. The examiner assures him that there is absolutely no problem with doing so. Hearing this, Zeke smiles and tells Langus that he is free to use a spear. Standing there like a motivational speaker, Zeke asks him whether he is prepared to leave as a loser. Langus immediately answers no. Gathering his resolve, he rises to his feet and tells Zeke that he will follow his advice and attempt the test with a spear. As he prepares himself, memories of his father begin flooding back. Langus's father was never allowed to enter Dragon's Nest and spent his entire life enduring mockery and humiliation. Despite all of that suffering, he never gave up and always did his best to raise his son properly. Because of everything his father sacrificed for him, Langus is determined to prove that he is not a fake dragon. He remembers Zeke's words that no matter how many times he used the sword, the result would never change. Although he has only known Zeke for a short time, he decides to trust him completely. The problem is that he has no idea how to use a spear. When he expresses this concern, Zeke simply tells him to thrust it straight ahead. He advises him not to overthink things and to simply do it. Langus knows that it should be impossible for someone wielding a spear for the very first time to damage the regeneration stone. Nevertheless, he also knows that he will never discover the truth if he does not try. Even though he has only just met Zeke, he chooses to place his faith in him. Since Zeke believes in him, he wants to believe in himself as well. Langus takes his stance and immediately notices something unusual. The ether source energy flowing through his body feels completely different from when he was holding a sword. With determination in his eyes, he rushes toward the regeneration stone and thrusts the spear forward. A massive shockwave erupts from the impact. Retin and his gang instantly start laughing, convinced that nothing has changed despite the weapon switch. However, upon taking a closer look, they realize something unbelievable. Langus actually did it. Shock spreads across everyone's faces. Even the examiner cannot believe what he is seeing. Langus has successfully pierced the regeneration stone with the spear. Zeke proudly begins clapping for him. Meanwhile, Langus stares at the result in complete disbelief. When the examiner records the result in his book and declares that Langus has passed the examination, Langus can barely believe his ears. He is forced to ask again just to make sure he heard correctly. Before the examiner can repeat himself, Zeke wraps his arms around Langus from behind and assures him that he really did it. Tears of joy fill Langus's eyes. Unable to contain his happiness, he hugs Zeke back. Retin and his friends refuse to accept reality. They convince themselves that Langus's success was nothing more than a lucky accident. At that moment, the examiner raises his voice and announces that the examination has officially concluded. He informs all applicants that the next event will be the entrance ceremony. When Zeke hears this announcement, he is genuinely surprised. He cannot believe that scratching the regeneration stone was the only test required for admission. Langus then mentions that there may actually be another examination after they officially enter the academy. Curious, Zeke asks what they are supposed to do next now that they have passed. Langus explains that the heads of the dragon family will soon arrive and offer congratulatory words to the successful applicants. Just then, a group of powerful men can be seen approaching from the distance. Their auras are overwhelming as they walk toward the students. Among them is one particular man who immediately catches Zeke's attention. Zeke asks Langus who the gloomy-looking man is. Langus is horrified. He cannot believe that Zeke has just insulted the family head. Completely unrestrained, Zeke proceeds to call the family head an ugly man. Before he can continue speaking, however, Langus quickly covers his mouth with both hands. Desperately, Langus begs him to stop talking. Although it is difficult for him, Zeke decides to remain silent. As he studies the approaching figures, Zeke recognizes them as the military strength of the dragon family. He is impressed because quite a few of them are genuinely powerful, with most of them being 6-star warriors. However, the head of the family, Balsa Eldragon stands above them all. Balsa is an 8-star warrior. That alone makes him an extraordinary figure. Back in Zeke's previous era, only a handful of 8-star warriors existed in the entire world. Seeing one now makes him wonder how many 8-star warriors are still alive in this age. Zeke then turns to Langus and tells him how he feels. Zeke tells Langus exactly how he feels. He lets him know that he does not like Balsa at all. He does not even care whether the man is his father or not. Just then, Balsa steps forward to address the students. The moment he moves, an overwhelming aura spreads across the area. He speaks only a few words, telling the students to become the flesh and blood of the dragon family. However, those simple words carry an immense weight. Combined with his powerful aura, they create a crushing pressure that causes every student except Zeke to tremble. Even Langus struggles under the pressure and complains that it is becoming difficult to breathe. Zeke, however, feels absolutely nothing. The only thing he feels toward Balsa is pure hatred, despite not understanding the reason behind it. After finishing his brief speech, Balsa turns around and leaves. Another elder immediately steps forward to take over. He informs the students that the head of the family expects great things from all of them. This elder also catches Zeke's attention. Curious, he begins wondering who the blonde-haired elder might be. With Balsa gone, Zeke notices that the tension among the students eases somewhat. Even so, they remain affected by the lingering impact of Balsa's overwhelming presence. Soon afterward, the examiner steps forward and announces that the dormitory assignments are about to be revealed. Zeke is surprised by this information because he assumed that everyone would be staying in the same place. Since Zeke clearly knows very little about the academy, Langus decides to explain things to him once again. He tells him that Dragon's Nest Academy has 4 dormitories. Students are assigned to one of 4 locations: the East Dorm, West Dorm, North Dorm, or South Dorm. A moment later, Zeke hears his own name being called. He stands up and prepares to leave. Before departing, he tells his new friend to take care of himself. The two exchange friendly farewells and well wishes before parting ways. Zeke learns that he has been assigned to the Academy's East Dorm. As he makes his way there, he is surprised by how much the world has changed over the course of 1,000 years. Following the directions written on the note in his hand, he carefully navigates through the Academy grounds in search of his room. Unfortunately, he ends up getting lost along the way. Because of this delay, Zeke begins worrying that his future roommate might be annoyed that he is arriving so late. After wandering around for some time, he finally reaches the correct room. Filled with enthusiasm and excitement, he confidently opens the door, ready to announce his arrival and greet his new roommate. However, the moment he sees who is inside, all of his excitement instantly disappears. The enthusiasm on his face vanishes as he stares at the person who has been assigned to share the room with him. Zeke cannot believe that his roommate is none other than Langus. And when he sees the boy, he just assumes that he has an unexplainable connection with him. Langus smiles while agreeing with him and also mentioning the fact that he was already feeling lonely. Zeke then asks Langus if there is no plan for the day, and he says there is none since their training session will start the next day. They have been instructed to rest. Zeke has no idea of this since he was not paying attention during the entire orientation session. He looks bright while admitting this, but Langus doesn't think it's something that he should be proud of. Langus decides to move past the entire scolding session and suggests that they get some sleep since they will be training the next day. Apparently, Zeke was initially planning to ditch the school and just go on an adventure, but the new things that he saw since he arrived at the school interested him. He has decided to stick with the house just a little bit if this will help him to learn more about the world after a millennium. A month later, the kids are undergoing intensive training under their tutor. They're being taught how to master the dragon's breath, which was made by the 15th head of House Lragon. The tutor tells them that they need to master the technique so that they can use it in any situation. The tutor moves around keeping an eye on the kids. He notices that some of them have mastered it, and one of them is Laika, the head of the house's daughter. Apparently, she is already skilled enough to be classified as a 2nd star. However, he is more interested in Zeke. While everyone else is struggling, Zeke is carrying a boulder on his head while holding 2 dumbbells that have small boulders on them too. The tutor starts to draw closer to the fact that Zeke inherited the head's power. However, he wonders how he is able to master everything since he had no teacher who could have put him through. The teacher can only wonder but couldn't come to a conclusion. On the other hand, Zeke is thinking about how the breathing technique, the Dragon King's breath that he invented, has been modified and passed down as Dragon's breath. Apparently, breathing techniques are ways to draw ether from the air into one's body and pass it around, which ultimately helps to enhance the ether. However, the optimal level depends on the user's skill and creativity. This is the reason each noble house refines its own style and keeps the finished technique secure. Zeke admits that the technique is safe and easy to learn, but he believes that it is utterly useless if he can only use it when he is standing still. Basically, his original technique allows him to use ether while moving around. The effects of the technique are huge, but only a few inherited it because of how difficult it is. Zeke simplified it back then so that anyone could use it in order to make the clan stronger, but he never thought it would evolve and be around for 1,000 more years. Zeke is impressed by this, and he believes that there might have been other martial arts techniques that have changed over time too. After the training session, the kids head to the dining hall to eat. While everyone is struggling to eat due to tiredness, Zeke is munching on his food without a care in the world. He notices that Langus is looking drained, and he urges him to eat his food because he won't be able to move optimally if he runs out of energy. Langus is forced to ask Zeke how he is so full of energy when everyone else is drained. Zeke disses Langus, telling him that he is just a weakling. He urges him to eat more and train harder. While lecturing Langus, Zeke notices that some of the kids who are well trained are actually eating their food. Just then, Zeke is approached by Laika, and because Zeke doesn't know her, he straight up asks her who she is. Langus almost chokes on his food when he hears this, and he quickly moves to Zeke to whisper in his ear. He tells him that Laika is the head's daughter, but Zeke innocently tells Langus that he had no idea. Langus is almost dying from pressure as he tells Zeke that they are not even supposed to be talking to Laika. Zeke just stares at him like a fool while telling him that he is also the head son, even though he is an illegitimate child. Langus and Laika are both shocked when they hear this, and Laika asks him if he is telling the truth. Zeke calmly replies that he has no reason to lie. Laika then asks him how he was able to get strong enough to smash a regeneration stone with his bare hands. Laika is genuinely interested, but Zeke just replies that he was able to do it because he is just a cool dude. Zeke notices that Langus is totally out of his zone, and he calls him back out of it, telling him to eat his food. Laika then moves closer to Zeke, asking him if he would like to join her. Zeke is confused by what she means, and Laika says it plainly, urging Zeke to become her subordinate. Laika tells Zeke that she is going to become his backer since he is an illegitimate child, and he would obviously want allies. Laika wants Zeke to assist her in becoming the next head using his power, and she promises to reward him generously when she becomes head of the family. She sweet talks this, but Zeke calmly tells her that he is not interested in the offer. When Laika hears this, she assumes that Zeke is also aiming to become the head of the family, which is why he is rejecting the proposal. While she is busy spewing her trash, Zeke is observing her, and he sees that she is already on the verge of becoming 2 stars, and he considers it something impressive for her age. Zeke finally opens his mouth to tell the girl that she is free to do whatever she likes, because he is not interested in anything that concerns the family. Laika is shocked to hear this, and she gets more persistent as she asks Zeke what he really wants. Zeke is pissed off, and he angrily stabs the table with his table knife while unleashing a scary amount of pressure from his body to tell Laika that he has no interest in serving anyone. Zeke says he wants to be alone because he is obviously the strongest. Laika can feel the pressure from Zeke, leaving her utterly shocked. She cannot believe that Zeke's aura is actually scaring her. Zeke continues munching on his food while Langus tries to calm the situation. Laika then loses it and she challenges Zeke to a duel. Zeke is surprised by this, but he is not one to shy away from a challenge. In no time, the news about the duel spread among the students that Laika is having a duel at the training grounds. The students rush over to watch the duel, and while Langus is freaking out, Zeke is acting very casual. Langus tries to remind Zeke that he is about to fight Laika, but Zeke simply replies that he has no idea who she is. Zeke then notices that Langus is also acting formally, and he asks him why this is. Well, genius, this is because you are the head son, Langus says. Zeke then asks Langus what it is that he wants from him. Zeke tries to explain the situation to him. He says Laika is Balsa's daughter, and she also has Tafona blood, which is basically one of the 4 great houses backing Eldrion. Langus says Laika is a genius because she was able to master every form of swordsmanship that comes from House Typhona. Zeke just stands there casually while telling Langus that the only thing he is aware of is the fact that she is Balsa's daughter. Zeke starts laughing, saying that not knowing actually adds more juice to the entire thing. He considers it an exciting turn of events, while Langus scolds him that there is no way he's going to win against Laika. Langus asks him why he accepted the challenge in the first place, and Zeke says it is obvious that he is expected to accept if he is challenged to a duel. In addition to this, Zeke stares at Laika and he concludes that she looks readier for the duel. Laika then screams at Zeke to stop chattering while staring at him with her sword pushed into the ground like a proper warrior, and asks Zeke if he is ready to be taught some really good manners. Since the two are ready to fight, Langus leaves the arena for them. Langus urges Zeke to be careful as he runs away. Now that they are alone, Zeke asks Laika why she is so hellbent on fighting him. Laika replies that she is aiming to be the next head of the house and to claim the said seat. She wants to defeat Zeke and make him serve her. Zeke is shocked when he hears this, and he starts wondering what it is everything has to do with him. Laika is surprised that Zeke is acting all nonchalant, and she asks him if he doesn't know the truth about his family because he is an illegitimate child. Zeke is about to tell Laika that he knows when she cuts him off. Laika explains that including Zeke, there are 5 heirs competing to be the next head. Zeke is the only one who doesn't carry blood from one of the 4 great houses of Eldrian. The key point is that whichever house produces the head, which means they are all striving to be the best in the academy and to stand against her brothers, Laika says she needs more allies. The whole explanation leaves Zeke totally confused, but he manages to grasp the point of it. Laika lets him know that she is fighting to secure her place, and without wasting any more time, she lunges towards Zeke. She is determined to defeat Zeke, and with her sword, she tries to land a hit on Zeke, but he suddenly steps back. Zeke dodges the strike, but the sword strike leaves the ground shattered. Laika is not ready to give up as she stands up again to attack Zeke. She swings her sword frantically and with great power, leaving the spectators totally amazed. They commend Laika for being so great with the sword, even if it is just a training sword, as if she can hear the spectators cheering for her as she increases the intensity of attacking Zeke. However, Zeke simply leaps around the arena, dodging her every strike. The spectators, on the other hand, are blown away by how powerful Laika is, since she is the child of the family head. They are confident that Laika will finish the match in time. Unknown to them, Laika is already getting frustrated because all Zeke does is jump around to dodge her strikes. Zeke puts little to no effort into dodging Laika's attacks, forcing her to question her inability to land a hit. Zeke commends Laika for actually being fast, and the kind of technique she is using also appears to be great. Zeke even adds that she is performing better than regular 1-star warriors. Laika gets mad and screams at Zeke, telling him to fight instead of just talking. Since this is what Laika wants, Zeke decides to give her a taste of his strength. Zeke easily dodges her strike before punching her in the chest. The punch sends a destructive wave through her body, causing her to cough up blood. Laika falls to her knees in pain, leaving the other students shocked. In pain, Laika looks up and asks Zeke why she can't land a hit on him when she is supposed to be much better than him. Zeke admits that she is faster than most 1-stars that he has met, but he lets her know that she is still nothing but a 1-star warrior. Laika then argues, reminding Zeke that he is also 1-star. Zeke explains that he can easily read her movements thanks to the way she breathes, the twitch of her muscles, and even the shift of her eyes. In addition to this, he has way more experience than her. Zeke explains this in such an arrogant way that it forces Laika to get back on her feet. She dashes towards Zeke again with her sword in hand, ready to tear his head off. But even with the surprise attack, Zeke still dodges by acrobatically leaping backwards. This leaves Laika clearly open to Zeke's attack, and Zeke punishes her by punching her straight into the far wall. She hits the wall and leaves a huge cloud of dust covering the area. The spectators are left shocked when they see this, as they wonder if Laika actually lost. Langus is excited when he sees this, and he rushes back into the arena, telling Zeke how incredible he is. However, Zeke tells Langus that the fight is not yet over. Zeke is impressed that Laika is actually able to withstand his blow. When the dust clears, Laika is seen struggling to get off her knees with a battered body, but she is not ready to give up. Langus tries telling her to stop because she might end up worse. Zeke then tells Langus to step back because things are about to get more serious, and if he gets injured, he is not going to be responsible for it. Zeke had suspected it, and now he confirms that Laika has reached 2 stars. Laika gets on her feet and a blaring aura swirls around her. The spectators immediately figure out that Laika has reached 2 stars. The 2-star realm is one where the wielder can can project true source power outside the body for martial arts. The projection is basically what is known as aura. Laika appears stronger, and she thanks Zeke for pushing her to be able to reach 2 stars. Enraged, she dashes towards Zeke, ready to strike him down. Her sword follows a golden trail of aura, and Zeke admits that she has gotten stronger and faster. Zeke continues to toy with her until he misjudges her strength, and he ends up getting cut on the face. Laika notices that he is left in awe, and she uses that to boast about the strength of a 2-star. She assures Zeke that he's about to face the true Thunder Spirit Great Sword Arts. Zeke, on the other hand, is excited because he will finally get to witness something he hasn't seen in the past. He is absolutely hyped to see what Laika has in store for him. Laika then activates her Thunderlight Flash technique that hits Zeke before he could even move, leaving him totally shocked and with questions of how Laika is able to wield lightning. Zeke admits that Laika is quite insane, but Laika doesn't see any form of regret coming from him because he is smiling. Laika angrily activates another technique, striking Zeke, leaving him to come to the conclusion that whatever Laika is doing is just too much for him. He knows that his body can't take what Laika is doing to him just yet, and while he is still trying to gather information on his current status, the spectators are all amazed. They never expected someone who is a 1-star warrior to stand toe-to-toe with Laika. Zeke figures out that Laika's movements haven't changed much, but her upgrade to 2 stars has given her a sudden explosive power. Zeke is forced to admit that Laika is doing pretty great, in addition to the fact that being covered in lightning the way she is doing it was basically impossible 1,000 years ago with the way she is moving around. Zeke figures out that he could land a counterattack, but he is curious to see her full power, so he is ready to take the hits till then. Laika is pissed that Zeke still has the effrontery to be smiling even when he is in such a bad situation. Laika is pissed that Zeke still has the effrontery to be smiling even when he is in such a bad situation. She concludes that Zeke is brimming with confidence and decides that she is going to take that confidence away from him. She dashes toward him with an even deadlier and faster technique that Zeke couldn't dodge. Zeke watches as the attack hits him, and he is thrown into the wall, leaving a loud explosion that gets everyone watching worried about his well-being. The dust clears off, and Zeke is still on his feet with a smile on his face. This pisses her off again, and she strikes him with another lightning bolt attack to get him on his knees. Langus comes running over, telling Laika to stop the attack, but Laika refuses, replying that Zeke is on his feet. Laika claims that she can't stop because that would only crush his pride. Laika promises to go easy on Zeke if he surrenders and swears loyalty to her. However, Zeke remains mute, and Laika can clearly see that even though he is not a legitimate child, his pride as an L-Dragon remains in him. Since he is acting all pompous, Laika decides that she is going to use everything she has to finish off the fight. She activates the Thunder Spirit Great Sword Arts, the Heavenly Thunder, and she strikes him with it. Zeke cannot move from where he is, and he is dealt the entire force of the strike. His body is hit with so much lightning that he screams out in pain. Once the attack is over, Zeke crashes to the shattered ground. Unresponsive, Laika finally pushes her sword into the ground, believing that the match is over. To her greatest surprise, she hears Zeke's voice behind her, saying he finally understands how things work. Laika turns back, and to add to the surprise, Zeke's body is now sparkling, pointing out the fact that he can now use electricity. This shocks her, and also leaves her asking why Zeke can use electricity. Zeke is also shocked because he didn't know that this is what they call electricity. He walks toward Laika with pride, telling her that he actually has no idea how he is able to do it. However, he was intentionally leaving himself to get hit so he could study Laika's power, and before he knew it, he could use it already. Even with his explanation, Laika is still ultimately confused, because what Zeke says should be impossible. All Zeke knows is that as Laika was hitting him with her attacks, he was constantly using his Dragon King's breath, and the lightning energy ended up reacting to his king's breath. This eventually built up lightning inside him, and in no time he found himself controlling lightning. Zeke tells Laika that he might not know all the detail, but he figures out that Laika has a rare body since the Great Sword Art is a family technique. Zeke decides to assume that her entire clan has the same constitution as her, and he has also learned a great lesson that source power itself can be fused with lightning. Zeke then adds that it is all thanks to Laika that he has managed to become 2 stars. With this, Zeke confidently tells her that the fight isn't over yet. Laika angrily swings her sword at him, but Zeke only smiles and activates his lightning powers. Zeke then jumps so fast that he couldn't control his body. Since his source power has been infused with lightning's properties, his entire muscles and nerves are stimulated, giving him more strength. Zeke considers it a special trait and concludes that he is going to get the hang of it in no time. Meanwhile, Lagnus can only watch from the sides as the two battle each other, and he is barely keeping up. Lagnus soon realizes that Zeke is already dodging Laika's strikes pretty effortlessly. Laika is frustrated about the whole thing, leaving her to ask Zeke if he is trying to mock her, but he says no, telling her that he actually sees her as a real threat. Laika swings her sword to a great distance just to try and catch him off guard, but he still dodges the strike, and he decides that it is time he finishes off the battle. Zeke mentions that to finish the battle, he is going to create a new technique, even though it's been a long time since he's done that. Laika is confused when Zeke says this, and Zeke lets her know that it is just as she heard it. He is going to create a new technique, or a special form to put it simply. This shocks Laika, leaving her to question if Zeke was trained in secret combat arts, but she can't fathom which house it is. Zeke notices that she is completely lost in her thoughts, and he uses the opportunity to charge toward her at great speed. Zeke hits her with his newest technique, the dragon slaying art, Tempest of Thunder. With a powerful combination of lightning bolts, Laika falls to her knees and Zeke smiles, saying the match is over. Laika is so damaged that she couldn't even stay on her knees, and she ends up crashing to the ground in pain. Laika crawls toward her sword because she cannot believe that she just lost, and she is aiming to surpass her brothers to become the next head of the house. While she is busy scolding herself, Zeke walks up to her, telling her that she was actually strong because she provided him with a really tough fight. Zeke mentions that he likes learning new things, and he doesn't consider the time of the battle a wait. With a smile on his face, he asks Laika if they will get another chance to duel again. In fact, he wants them to still engage in another duel in the future. But while saying this, Laika is just staring in horror and shock. A few hours later, Laika's father, Balsa, is seen in a dungeon wiping out monsters as if they were nothing. Just the first form of his dragon combat arts is enough to take out a whole horde of monsters without stress. He is doing his thing when a messenger enters the dungeon to tell him about the latest report concerning his daughter. He lets Balsa know that his daughter Laika has advanced to 2-star, but Balsa is not moved by this. The dude tries telling Balsa that Laika's advancement is a really huge feat for her age, because as things stand, she might reach 5-star before she graduates. Balsa then clears the air, saying talent is nothing unless it is put to use. He urges the dude to come back with more news when she has finally used her new power. Just then, the dude tells Balsa that Laika just lost a fight, and Balsa assumes that she fought a senior. However, the messenger tells him that the person who defeated Laika was his illegitimate son, Zeke. Balsa remembers Zeke because of the woman who birthed him. Balsa admits that Zeke's mother actually had talent, but he knows that his mother was long dead before he was born. This leaves him wondering how he was able to acquire the skills that he used in defeating a 2-star. The messenger then mentions that the beautiful thing about the entire thing is that Zeke got to 2-star on his own. He didn't have anyone mentoring him, but he kept pushing forward. Upon hearing this, Balsa decides that it is time they begin the first trial. The dude is shocked to hear this, and he tries to remind Balsa that it is too early, but Balsa doesn't care. He says death comes to all equally, and only the strong are allowed to survive. Balsa says anyone who is not able to survive the first trial is absolute trash and deserves no future. The officer has no choice but to follow his boss's order. Balsa adds more shocking orders to what he is passing out by telling the officer to summon Freya. He is forced to ask again, and Balsa confirms this, saying he wants Freya to be the one to oversee the trial since Zeke happens to be an interesting kid. The officer acknowledges the order and walks away, but as he does, Balsa finally shows his excitement to see what Zeke has in store for him. Later on, Zeke and the other students are in the training ground following the teacher's instructions. However, Zeke is doing his own thing by carrying boulders 5 times his size. He is busy working on his breathing technique while the other kids are practicing the dragon's breath. The breathing technique he is learning is considered simple to him, and he expects kids to be able to even learn it. Langus soon notices Zeke's difference in training regimen, and he asks him if he is not interested in training with them. Zeke says he doesn't understand where he is coming from, and Langus mentions the dragon combat arts training. training. Zeke then calmly replies that he has already learned it, shocking Langus. Langus argues with him because they just taught them moments ago, and there is no way he has already mastered it. Zeke then decides to give him some lessons about his ether flow and how imbalanced it is. Zeke drops the heavy boulder that he is carrying on his head and tells Langus to turn around. Langus does this, and Zeke hits him from behind, passing some really good ether energy into him. Zeke tells Langus that what he is feeling is the proper channeling route. Langus can immediately feel the difference, and he thanks Zeke for his help. This is when it finally dawns on Langus that Zeke actually mastered it, but Zeke is pissed that Langus even doubted him. Langus quickly clears the air, telling Zeke that he misunderstands him. Langus mentions that he has never been taught by anyone besides his father, which is why he has always had to push himself. However, Zeke is already strong enough to defeat Laika on his own. Langus assumes that the dragon combat arts are simple and boring for Zeke, but Zeke says this is not the case. Zeke mentions that the stability is actually quite impressive. Basically, dragon combat arts was once talked down on by his sons who claimed that it was too complex and difficult. Even though it is complex, it is a combat art of overwhelming power that has several fighting forms incorporated into it. In addition, Zeke has just gotten a new form thanks to his fight with Laika. It turns out that the technique he used in defeating the dragon is the final form, and Zeke is curious to see how the technique has been refined over the years. Zeke then decides that it is time to return to physical training since there is nothing else to learn from dragon combat arts. Suddenly, Langus hits Zeke with a weird request, asking him if he would do him the honor of training him. Langus talks about his desire to get really strong, even though it is quite tough. Surprisingly, Zeke tells him that he is up for it because he sees Langus as someone who is teachable. Langus is still celebrating his win when a familiar voice appears from behind, asking Zeke to train her too. The voice is none other than Laika, and even though she is shy about it, she cannot help but admit the fact that Zeke is impressive enough to have defeated her. Laika talks about just how good Zeke is, and she admits that her pride was shattered during their match. Zeke is shocked by the sudden request, and Laika adds that she also wants to get stronger so she can surpass her brothers and even Zeke himself. Laika completely throws away her ego, and she urges Zeke to teach her how to be stronger, but Zeke takes a moment to think about his answer, leaving Laika in a state of panic. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment next part in the comment section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Our MC wanted to reach the peak of martial arts, but he already knew that it was a position he could never achieve, no matter how much he tried. However, he was desperate to achieve his goal, and because of this, he decided to follow a legend that had been passed down through generations. Apparently, there was a golden fruit located within a sanctuary that was guarded by a dragon. This fruit was said to grant immortality. After a hard, long-fought battle against the dragon, our MC finally reached the golden fruit. He was surprised to see that the fruit actually existed, and he sat on the dragon's corpse like a true conqueror before making a move to eat it. He was confident that by consuming the fruit, he would finally be able to reach the peak of martial arts. Our MC's name was Gilfus Eldrian, and he was hailed as the strongest man in the world. Decades later, Gilfus had grown old and was now on his deathbed. He was surrounded by his family members, and sitting beside him was his eldest son, Gileam. Gilfus noticed the sadness on his son's face and urged him to stay strong, saying that his time had come. Gileam was heartbroken that he was about to lose his father, just as he had already lost his mother. As he approached death, Gilfus thought about the immortality fruit and realized that it had all been nonsense. However, he found comfort in the fact that he had been blessed with a loving wife and children. He told his family that he had lived a good life and had no regrets. Deep down, however, that was a complete lie. Gilfus regretted that he had never been able to reach the true peak of martial arts. Moments later, he passed away. Suddenly, he opened his eyes again. Shocked, he wondered why everything looked different. His body felt strangely light, and when he looked at his hands, he realized they were tiny baby hands. It finally dawned on him that he was a baby lying in a crib. Although stunned, Gilfus quickly calmed himself. After all, he had been a 10-star warrior in his previous life. He concluded that his situation was far from normal and began wondering what could have caused it. Then it hit him. The so-called immortality fruit he had eaten was not actually an immortality fruit. The fruit's true power was reincarnation, not immortality, just as he had once suspected. Instead of being disappointed, he smiled. In fact, he considered reincarnation to be an even better blessing. Now he had another chance to reach the peak of martial arts. Looking around, he noticed several other babies nearby. Since he was in a separate building, he concluded that he had been reborn into the dragon family. However, he soon wondered why there were so many babies gathered in one room. Just then, several maids entered carrying feeding bottles. One of them reached into a crib and picked up a baby goblin before feeding it from a bottle. Gilfus was shocked to see a goblin among the babies and wondered what the maids were planning. After drinking the red substance from the bottle, the goblin suddenly exploded, spraying blood everywhere and splattering Gilfus's face. Terrified, he tried to understand what had been inside the bottle. The maids then decided to dilute the substance and continued feeding it to the children. Soon, Gilfus himself was picked up by a maid while he was still trying to process what had just happened. He could clearly see that the bottle's contents were not milk. Instead, it seemed to be overflowing with magical energy. He couldn't believe that the maids were feeding babies something so dangerous. The maid pushed the bottle into his mouth, and as soon as he tasted the liquid, Gilfus finally realized what it was. Ancient dragon blood. He was stunned. How could anyone be insane enough to make babies drink dragon blood? He finally understood why the maids had talked about diluting it. At first, he planned to spit it out immediately. However, he realized that he had already swallowed a small amount. Fortunately, he concluded that such a tiny quantity probably would not kill him. He noticed that the other babies were also spitting out the substance and decided that doing the same was the safest option before he exploded. Then another thought crossed his mind. What if spitting it out was a mistake? If he managed to absorb all of the magical power contained within the dragon blood, he might surpass his former self and finally reach the peak of martial arts. Although he had no idea what was really happening, he decided to take advantage of the opportunity. With determination burning in his eyes, he drank every last drop from the bottle. Even the maid was shocked to see him happily consuming the dragon blood. At the same time, she seemed pleased that things were proceeding as expected. After finishing the entire bottle, Gilfus was placed back into his crib. He quickly realized that the other babies had also survived the ordeal. Like any ordinary baby, after a full meal, he soon became sleepy and drifted off to sleep. 7 years later, Gilfus could be seen training intensely. He balanced a massive boulder on his feet while performing one-handed push-ups. After completing 1,000 push-ups, he launched the boulder into the distance with a powerful kick. Admiring his muscular physique, he couldn't help but smile. By this point, Gilfus was now known as Zeke Eldrian. Zeke attributed his incredible strength to the dragon blood he had consumed as a baby. The dragon blood contained an immense amount of power, and even babies who had only absorbed a small amount developed bodies far stronger than those of ordinary humans. However, thanks to the divine dragon's true source power that he had already absorbed in his previous life, Zeke was able to absorb every drop of the ancient dragon's unique power. This resulted in a transformation so extraordinary that even he was shocked by the outcome. Despite all this, Zeke remained disappointed. He was still only a 1-star warrior. In his opinion, he should have been at least a 4-star warrior by now. A star represented one's true source of power compressed to its absolute limit. Practitioners envisioned their bodies as universes and allowed stars to move within them. As more stars were formed, the difficulty increased dramatically, but so did the power they granted. In his previous life, Zeke had managed to reach the rank of 10 stars, making him the only person in history to ever achieve such a feat. 7 years had passed since Zeke was born as the son of the current head of the dragon family. However, he was merely an illegitimate child. His mother had already passed away, and his father had never once bothered to show his face. Zeke couldn't believe that he had ended up with such a worthless father. To make matters even stranger, he had reincarnated 1,000 years into the future. The world had changed drastically and had become a brutal place where the weak died at the hands of the strong.